One bright day, a huge green dragon appeared in the blue sky and let out a loud roar that shook the air. A dragon spun in endless circles across the wide sky, soaring wildly and feeling as free as anything I've ever seen. A dragon zoomed right over the man below, and with a mighty strike, it splattered Asta's face in blood, leaving him looking completely drained. High above in the wide sky, the dragon spread its wings and soared away as Asta watched it go, marking the moment the great magic clan Declan chose to quit their job as trouble cleaners. Then he squeezed his fist tight under the bright sun, because that was the only reason he could find. As dark clouds rolled in to cover the sky, a black crow let out a loud cry before hearing a powerful voice declare, "Now you're the last one left," and then flew away to join the rest of the flock. Down below, Asta used his magic to choke someone around the neck. A green-haired man writhing in pain gasped that Asta had been hiding his true strength, but Asta just smiled faintly and declared that he was the one asking questions. Holding up a grimoire, the man admitted to knowing in pain, while Asta guessed the Declan clan must have brought the whole pack because the man couldn't explain how to use it, which puzzled Asta since the greedy clan member wouldn't have hidden such a dangerous book in a dusty basement if he didn't know how to use it himself. Right after that, Asta nodded. That just proves how valuable it really is. But the green-haired man suddenly spoke, snapping Asta's gaze toward him as he demanded, "Hand over the grimoire." And even while at a disadvantage, he tried to threaten by saying, "Then I'll ask the leader to spare you. Maybe even let you go back to being a cleaner." Yet Asta felt no fear and just gave a small smirk. He held the green-haired man's neck tight in his grip while Asta sneered, "What right do you have to say that?" and threatened him back, only to be met with a groan of pain and a curse as the man accepted his fate, just before a slow, cane-tapping step made Asta jump in fear. He turned around to see a man glowing with red energy who said his instincts were sharp, and as Asta stared in shock at the famous Declan clan leader who asked for his grimoire, he couldn't help but wonder about the kind, powerful mage standing before him. Seeing that, Asta froze in shock and muttered, "What a hassle," while Farron stared blankly at him in helpless silence before Asta snatched up the book and demanded, "Are you just going to take someone else's spoils that easily? You have no shame." So the two faced each other, each one laughing in a different way. Asta laughed nervously and blamed himself, admitting that eating that dragon was bad luck since the clan leader had shown up, while his trembling hands revealed how powerful and scary the mage truly was. Asta squeezed his fist until a burst of green light exploded out and asked, "You've been watching the fight, haven't you?" While above, the green-haired man dangled with his tongue hanging out from the tight grip on his neck. Asta's neck snapped to the side as he boldly asked, "How many lives has this thing already taken?" And his words pushed Farron into a rage so fierce it twisted his face into a mask of fury. But he remained calm, saying, "So that's the plan. You could die here," which made worry flash across Asta's face as he stood silent, realizing he was right, just as quick footsteps suddenly rushed across the ground. Asta jumped high and raised his fist in victory, shouting exactly, just as two blasts of white and red light crashed together with a violent force. Asta's face went fierce as he roared, "You won't know who lasts longer until you measure it," to which Farron calmly replied, "Fine, looks like I need to show you your place," while pointing at the red circle in front of him and getting ready. Farron stood there below while Asta let loose his powerful attack straight at him. He held his hand over the circle, looking completely relaxed about it. Asta's face turned pale from the hit, and he plummeted from the air to the ground, dragging his feet to soften the crash as he muttered, "This crazy bastard," before realizing with a worried glance that the enemy, the Declan clan leader, had absolutely no gaps in his defense, prompting a sudden voice to taunt him, "You're losing focus," just as the enemy blocked the light. Farron asked, "Didn't you say you have to measure to know?" To which Asta replied, "Some things you just know without measuring." While standing there, touching the red circle and looking up, Farron spoke with a heavy heart, "Like the gap between us." Right before a golden flash blinded everyone around them, a giant red ring shielded Farron as he grinned and asked if they were ready to talk. Then he laughed at the gray sky and teased the idea of him surrendering, while Asta on the other side began gathering his magic. His face, smeared with blood and eyes wide with rage, snapped, "You think I'd believe you?" before unleashing his attack and screaming, "I'm done eating dog food," as his power slammed down toward Farron. His face twisted in a vicious snarl as he screamed, "Who wants to go back to being a dog? Just because of a shiny leash and a big house doesn't mean it's not a kennel." But Farron calmly tapped his staff on the ground and sneered, "How pathetic," right before a red circle suddenly appeared beneath his feet. A burst of light shot out from the circle and launched Asta flying far away. Farron held up his hand to shape the red circle and looked up, saying with the tone of someone about to strike a deadly blow, "Let me show you what true overwhelming power looks like," which made Asta kneel and curse him as purple lightning crashed down from the sky. Asta remembered how silly he looked back then, just like the day I gazed up at the sky. Against the gray sky, a dragon rose into the air and soared high above us. Suddenly, the ghost of his pain surfaced, and that was the very reason I chose to look up that day. Farron leaned on his staff and grinned, admitting Asta was surprisingly strong, then offered him a shocking new role as the powerful leader of the Bongshin clan instead of just a cleaner, leaving Asta stunned as Farron revealed his true plan to turn the legendary Declan family into his loyal vassals. Asta held the book out to Farron, smiling to say his choice was wise and that all his past wrongs were now gone. But as Farron warned him that only glory awaited by Declan's side, a sudden purple light burst from the book in Asta's hand. Farron's face turned dark as Asta glared at him. "What are you doing?" she snapped back. "You said I could give this to you as long as I didn't mind it turning to ash, didn't you?" Farron was so angry his veins bulged and he shouted, "You'll never get an easy death." But Asta cut him off sharply. "Ah, shut up and listen," she said while holding the book glowing with purple light. "I've never done this kind of work for money. Cleaners don't make money anyway. So why did I keep this thing?" "Because it's tied to money," Asta continued asking, making Farron's eyes widen in shock. "Have you ever heard of a cleaner getting eaten alive by a Declan young master?" "He knew about the forbidden magic," Asta confirmed, "because that bastard had swallowed my teammate whole, and Declan kept it all a secret." As if piecing it together, Farron kept talking while Asta sighed. "Humph. Why bother with revenge when I know how cheap a cleaner's life really is? And my teammate with his sharp green eyes just wanted to make sure they got what they wished for." As warm sunlight began to peek through the gray sky, then Asta smiled, but he knew it cost a fortune, so he finally decided to walk away for good and never return to that kennel. Farron waited quietly in silence for Asta to speak. Then she handed over her last will and testament. Then he flicked his fingers once. Just as Farron turned away, a blue flame that never goes out wrapped around Asta, and he whispered that it was Declan's most special gift. Farron glanced back, seeing the burning regret in his eyes that had eaten away to his very bones. Asta glared with defiance and shouted, "Regret? Never!" As Farron slowly disappeared into the distance and Asta thought, "If being Declan's dog is the only way left, I'd rather return to the gray zone even if I can't. Dying isn't so bad." Asta sat right in the middle of the roaring fire, smiling with pure happiness. He burst out laughing so hard he seemed free for a moment, only to sigh and realize he was still trapped by his own fate. Surrounded by the flames, he thought that while dying without an escape felt like a shame, he had no regrets and vowed that if he were reborn, he would finally chase true freedom and take revenge properly, knowing that just like all rivers end up in the sea, his journey would lead somewhere new. But strangely, Asta stood there with not a scratch on him. "What the hell?" he thought, watching Farron vanish into the distance as if everything had suddenly come to a halt. Asta crouched behind a rock and peeked out. He gripped the grimoire tightly in his hand. Asta opened her hand, and the blue fire wrapped around the book. He stood frozen in shock, muttering to himself, "What on earth is this?" A golden circle flashed into view, leaving Asta completely confused and wondering what on earth was going on. A coin falls into the old, battered bucket. As a young boy, Asta pulled a bucket while begging, but then he stopped dead in his tracks, screaming in his mind, "What's happening? I'm burning up." Something felt wrong, so Asta panicked and slowly lifted his face. As he looked at the dilapidated houses around him, his heart swelled with questions, wondering exactly where he was. Then he stared down at the bucket of stray coins and felt like he'd stepped back in time. So familiar it was scary, until Asta suddenly shouted, "I remember now!" He had once scraped by in this gray zone, unnoticed by the people rushing around him, until he became a cleaner. Asta stared at his hands, still thinking it couldn't be true, until the clear blue sky and gentle sunlight proved he had really gone back in time, and the quiet rundown houses in the gray zone confirmed it. Asta crumpled to the ground by the river, dazed and muttering to herself, "What on earth just happened?" Looking at his reflection in the water, he stayed still on the outside, but inside he was a mess, whispering to himself that this was definitely him, just like he was back when he was a kid. Suddenly, a faint magic circle glowed on his chest, leaving Asta dazed and confused since the mark stayed with him even after he traveled back in time. Sitting on the warm grass under the bright sun, he thought for a moment and realized that the book must have done something. Still holding on to the memory of the book, he felt a doubt creep in about its true power, yet the fact that the lazy old Declan clan leader had taken time to come see it proved just how special this grimoire really was, and that very importance meant no one could possibly know what it held. So he shook off his tangled thoughts and decided that whatever it was, it seemed like a good thing all the same. It felt too real to be a dream, so he looked at the water in front of him, sighed quietly, and realized the awful stench from Sale's lecture hall proved he was definitely still alive. He waved his arm like he was testing it out and thought, "It's not just alive." Snapping out of his thoughts, Asta clenched his fist with energy, feeling a morning full of life and burning ambition. knowing that anything could succeed in this moment. Yet he still wondered to himself in confusion exactly what counts as success. Beneath the hot sun, Asta half closed his eyes and whispered, "I once had a dream, yes, and it was my teammate's dream too," letting his thoughts wander back to days when they both gazed at the horizon, only for him to suddenly snap back and shout, "Number one! I mean Aster!" Aster didn't turn around but whispered that they were born as strays in a gray zone with nothing at all. No food, no clothes, and no school, and then asked which of those hurts the most. Asta asked if they weren't getting to eat, but Aster didn't repeat the words and kept going, saying that if hunger were the only problem, they wouldn't be in this mess because when you're starving you just have to keep going. Then he asked again, "But what do you think dragged our lives down into the sewer?" While playfully messing around despite Aster's somber mood and answering casually that he was fine with it, only for Aster, annoyed and serious, to insist that the reason their lives fell to the bottom was the real issue, until Asta cut him off flatly by repeating, "I said I'm fine with it." Aster's annoyance peaked as she gave him a sharp, friendly glare, which made him stop teasing and admit defeat with a helpless sigh. All right, I'll say it. Look at that glare." Only then did he truly listen to Aster say that not having an education was the most painful thing of all. If we'd been taught properly, we wouldn't have had to live like this, getting trampled by those damn nobles. As both gazed at the distant sunset horizon and Aster spoke of wanting to retire one day, he unconsciously broke into a bright smile. Back in the present, Asta finished the task with a smile and envisioned a library open to everyone, rich or poor, regardless of gender or status, before raising his hand to the blue sky with a daring thought to go even further. "I dreamt again and built a tower for no reason at all, just because I love tall things, placing it anywhere I please." Asta couldn't help whispering, "Any book will do, but one specific title must be there." The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, laughing wildly and shouting with joy that he would place Declan's top-secret manual right in the entrance hall on the first floor so that anyone, whether they were a gray zone wanderer, a noble rogue, or a butcher kid, could grab a copy, with the cover bearing Declan's emblem and pages filled with the secret arts they value more than their lives. And as he imagined it all, his visions grew grander and grander. He pictured everyone holding that book hand in hand and couldn't help but exclaim, "Just imagining it makes me drool. But how the hell do I get that book?" The sky turned a deep, bright blue as he crossed his arms, chuckled, and muttered, "Well, that's future me's problem anyway." Before a foot suddenly slammed into his face with a shout, "It's you!" Asta was knocked flat to the ground while a boy screamed insults and punched him without mercy, leaving Asta confused and wondering who this attacker was. Although I've survived countless battles, I have never faced an aerial fight, so when he thought about that, he bravely grabbed the foot kicking him and stopped it. The boy was shocked by the move but quickly snapped back to shout, "Oh, you dare block my hit?" As Asta's cold voice slowly replied, "You hit me 7 times. Then he ate 70 back, and his face froze over with pure killing intent. That scared the boy so much he jerked back without thinking. Just as he was about to punch the boy, a loud snap echoed from his own hand. He yanked his fist back in confusion, staring at his hand and wondering, "What the heck is going on? It's glowing." As he got lost in thought, the boy swung a hard punch right into his face and shouted, "You bastard! You dare hit this big bro! You punk thinks you can dare to touch me? You crazy?" He kept cursing without mercy, pummeling Asta until she rolled on the ground. Asta couldn't fight back, so he just cupped his hands over his head as tears poured down, thinking helplessly that his body hurt so much he was crying, but his heart was breaking even more. The boy took a clumsy tumble after his foot caught on a hidden rock. He tumbled back and hit the ground with a loud thud. Asta dove into the water, spotted the opening, and told himself this was his moment, while the boy climbed up and shouted curses, calling him a little brat. As Asta sprinted away, he roared in anger, demanding to know where she was going, only for her to shout back that she wasn't fleeing, which made him freeze and glare with cold resolve, secretly admitting in his own mind that this was just a smart move to get away. "The blows you dealt to me will be worn on my chest like medals of honor, proving I am a veteran cleaner who never gives up." Standing at the corner, Asta stared at his hand and whispered to himself, "Damn it, this isn't good." Staring at his bruised and swollen wrist, he growled that he wasn't just an ordinary office worker, but even a few punches had dislocated it, proving his body was far too weak. He shook off the wild thoughts swirling in his mind and decided to put the tower aside for now, knowing that fixing this broken body was his first priority. Right then, a voice shouted at Asta, "Are you hungry?" A boy stepped up beside him. Asta rubbed his wrist, looked at the man, and asked, "Do you know me?" Damian answered honestly, "No." Asta turned away, gave him one last look, and thought to herself, "I knew it all along. You look pathetic, but your clothes are expensive, which means you're probably a powerful noble who got thrown out of their family and is now a walking bomb of beauty and danger while Damien just stands there quietly watching you. Asta briefly called out, "Hey, kid," while Damien pointed to himself and said, "I'm Damien," only for Asta to be cut off as Damien added, "My mom is Bianca," leaving Asta frozen in shock and wondering why he suddenly felt like he'd stumbled into information he shouldn't have known. After a few seconds of silence, Asta couldn't hold back his irritation and half-scolded. Half-asked Damien if his head was acting up, only for Damien to innocently reply that he didn't have a mom, which made Asta feel guilty and think, "Oh, my bad." So he quickly pretended to be tough by saying, "Well, I don't have a dad either, so we're even. Now let's part ways here. Got it?" Because inside he was just thinking, best not get involved with a bomb like that. Cut ties early before things get messy, eh? Even though Damien just stood there staring at him without speaking or leaving, Asta lost her patience and demanded, "You're not coming?" While Damien bluntly replied, "I'll go with you," making her mutter irritably, "Should I just smack him?" Before snapping, "Move aside." Suddenly, Damien reached out as if to touch her and asked, "Hey, doesn't that hurt?" Then his face lit up with excitement as he declared, "I'll heal it," right as he began to cast his magic. Staring at the glowing circle, Asta stared blankly and asked, "What is this?" Damien saw his confusion, smiled, and simply said magic. But Asta already knew it wasn't just any healing spell. It was the forbidden secret art of the Blander family, the clan that Declan once destroyed, a dark truth that surfaced from his fading memories. Deep inside, he stayed on high alert, warning himself that the filthy, dangerous thing his instincts screamed he should avoid was now clinging to him. So he unconsciously stared hard at Damien. Suddenly, his mind raced with urgent questions, realizing that a child of Blander shouldn't be in the gray zone while the nation was still at its peak power. So without hesitation, he shouted Damien's name, which caused the boy to gasp in surprise and beam with happiness at being called, leaving Asta stunned and muttering a curse as he stared into Damien's unique two-colored eyes, finally snapping to attention and remembering that such strange eyes belonged to someone with Blander blood. Thinking of the Blander monster made him relive a terrifying vision of fire, dead bodies, and Damien's chilling laughter as that unkillable mad butcher. Right now, Damien was just a cute, innocent kid happily giggling and counting ants with wonder. 1, 2. But seeing him brought back Asta's memories of his past life, leaving him frozen in shock and thinking, "You've got to be kidding me." Especially as a group of people in black cloaks rushed toward the light, reminding him that before his regression, he used to be a cleaner sent to the Blander family by Declan. His past self grumbled irritably, "Damn it, if it's Blander's business, handle it yourselves. Why drag us in?" The person beside him replied, "Well, we don't really understand the higher-ups' schemes either." Another one suddenly jumped closer and recounted, "I heard in the soft territory there's a monster. Rumor has it dozens of people have died." He frowned and guessed, "Monster like an ogre or something." But then his face showed fear and then I saw it. Right before their eyes, something got ripped in two, and it wasn't an ogre at all. A shirtless human monster screamed in madness as it ripped another person apart with its bare hands, laughing maniacally while endlessly casting Soft's exclusive healing magic to keep fighting. The unstoppable monster from Blander stomped over hundreds of dead bodies. A mad butcher who could not be killed. The monster with golden and red eyes and that ever-present insane smile on its lips is Damien von Blander. Back in the present, Damien crouched down and beamed like a bright flower. He started counting under Asta's watchful eyes. 1, 2. Asta doubted himself inwardly. For real? He stared at Damien with a mountain of questions, wondering why the legitimate son of a family head would live in such a dump, until the boy suddenly shouted for food and explained that proper eating keeps sickness away. So Asta agreed, brushed off his pants, and asked if he had money, only for Damien to hand over a pouch of gold coins without suspicion, prompting Asta to grab him in a friendly hug, give a thumbs up, and insist they be friends who share everything, leading them to head off, together to eat under the sunset sky where the boy asked what Asta had to offer, and Asta casually replied that having a friend was pretty cool, before they arrived at a small inn tucked among the houses at night. Asta let out a loud burp, rubbed his full belly, and sighed with satisfaction that the meal was amazing and washing his face felt so refreshing. But when he saw Damien looking around curiously, he asked what the boy was doing, only to be told that Damien didn't know the place had rooms upstairs and usually slept on the streets. Realizing how convenient it was to have a house, which made Asta vaguely agree until the boy suddenly jumped up and seriously claimed he had no dad, causing Asta to quickly deny it and try to change the subject by asking about his mom. But Damien looked clueless and said she wasn't there, making Asta slap his forehead in despair before asking how long he'd been alone, which the boy answered by counting that he had slept 10 times since running away, leading Asta to worry if he was being chased. Damien casually claimed he takes naps too, leaving Asta's head buzzing with question marks. The boy grinned, held up 2 fingers, and said he took short naps twice a day totaling 10 sleeps, which only confused Asta more until he guessed it meant 3 or 4 days, causing Damien to flop onto the bed and complain about the ground being too hard, leaving Asta staring up in a blank stare. Then he turned to take a look at the soft pillow behind him. Asta buried his face in the pillow and yelled, "This kid is insane from birth," then peeked through his fingers before lying back to muse that while the boy is stuck in the gray zone, he could act as his temporary babysitter and maybe even make some friends with Blander along the way. Damien, staring at the ceiling, whispered about how facing Declan later would be useful and that powerful families usually have rare books, while Asta remembered his painful past and resolved to handle his deep-seated grudges first. He told Damien to stay out of trouble and go practice breathing exercises while he finished his own, promising to wait and watch the boy do it happily. Once that was done, Asta closed his eyes and recalled how, in his previous life, he had built his magic foundation using basic spells allowed to cleaners but hit obvious limits. So he had sneaked into many noble families to steal magic, surviving countless near-death experiences amidst shattered glass and scattered spells under he had been studying dark magic, summoning spirits, and mixing alchemical potions. But then he suddenly remembered the face of the man with the cane who had just died. Amidst the roaring clouds, a cloaked figure stood while Asta suddenly snapped his eyes open to stare at the ceiling, his green gaze burning with fierce determination, proving he had finally seen true power. His lips tightened, and he closed his eyes to feel the real magic of a technique that can hold any kind of power, which suddenly lit up a fierce flame on his chest. Asta's eyes went wide with pain as he cried out that it felt like lava burning through him, but forcing himself to focus, he tried to move the heat around only for his eyes to bulge again at a new discovery. A strange, dirty flow of magic energy suddenly appeared in his hand, making him wonder why the old noble had once forced this advanced, pure blood-only power into his body, burning away all the grime inside him with a cold blue current. His whole body was sinking into a lake of pure mana that was washing away all impurities. Asta's heart raced as she jolted out of her trance, soaked in cold sweat. Breathing hard as he sat up, Damien whispered, "How long has it been?" While the person in the next bed slept soundly. Asta widened his eyes at his clean hand, whispering that the mana was now purer than ever before, and then he frowned up at the thought of a man standing so much taller than him. Even if he had to be reborn 100 times to defeat Declan, it might still be impossible. Yet he clenched his fist with confidence and smiled proudly. "My chances have gone up. I am a cleaner who never gives up, even when hope is just 0.01%. The next morning, a shocked cry echoed from the inn as Damien stared in disbelief at his new brown hair, while Estar secretly cheered that their disguise was perfect and only one final task remained before Damien cheerfully asked what they should do next, causing Estar to smile with sparkling excitement and declare, "Cause chaos," just as someone else woke up and stretched elsewhere. Spotty stretched out under the warm morning sun, feeling good after a great sleep and the nice weather, until he suddenly stopped moving and stared straight ahead with fear. Estar and Damien walked slowly toward Spotty, who muttered about the kid's bad taste, then roared that he looked like he'd just crawled out of a sewer before Estar punched him straight in the stomach. As Spotty fell unconscious, Estar spoke with a clenched fist of rage. "Looks like I found the right place because you're still crystal clear in my memory. 123 hits means you're getting every single one," just as 2 more gang members rushed out to find the whole group gathered, shouting about the intruder and laughing excitedly at the sight of the terrifying little punk among familiar faces. As Estar muttered about how far he could push today, both he and Damien wore dark, serious faces until Damien asked curiously what game they were playing, right before a hard punch knocked a young man backward and broke his jaw. Estar didn't hesitate. He struck the gut of the charging man with a powerful blow, sending him flying backward and tumbling across the ground. Estar moved freely and mercilessly, swinging his fists without holding back against anyone. The entire crowd surged toward him like a wild ocean, yet not a single person could even brush against him, leaving Damien watching from the sidelines in pure wonder. Estar squeezed his fist tight, pouring all his magic into it, then let loose a storm of attacks. Damien's eyes lit up with excitement as Estar reminded him that the peak performance they were showing was a legendary act from the past, which Damien quickly mimicked with enthusiasm before a knocked-out opponent rolled to his feet only to be healed gently by Damien's magic, while another figure suddenly appeared like a ghost beside a victim to demand how many hits had been delivered, triggering a brutal series of sharp sounds and endless screams as Estar punched from morning until evening, without showing any mercy. While one guy tried to slip away in the chaos, he was caught and got a loud, painful smack on his bottom from Estar's staff. Then Estar slowly approached and asked, "How many times did you get hits?" The guy clutched his red butt and stammered, "I forgot." Estar glanced back and called, "Hey friend." Damien ran over excitedly. My turn, my turn." Estar ordered casually like it was a song. "Heal his hands." The young man despaired inwardly. "Stop already." Estar cracked his knuckles, smirking wickedly. Listen carefully, you're in the role of the punching bag. Got it? Damien happily supported. Heel hands, heel hands. The soon-to-be pummeled guy screamed internally. Stop, you demons. I only know numbers up to 2 digits. Now it was night. A full moon hung high in the sky, casting faint silver light over every rooftop. Down below, Estar had finished his day's work and smiled, saying thanks as the beaten gang lined up to offer their own grateful reply, while Damien clapped enthusiastically and promised to play again tomorrow, leaving Estar feeling proud and exhilarated about the fresh challenge of landing over 1,000 hits, until a faint, hesitant sound pulled him back from his thoughts. The bruised young man bowed and begged to leave, but Estar mockingly called his claim that it was his house a joke, only for the terrified man to scramble away as Estar sensed a new, fierce figure landing in the alley. Estar narrowed his eyes, analyzing the moment as quick, quiet, and feeling like a cleaner, before his gaze grew tense toward the person standing beside him. In his head, a thought sparked. They're hunting Damien, and I should have stayed hidden, but Blander found him first. Estar shut his eyes, gathering the last bit of magic he had, knowing one spell would be a struggle and a fight would be even harder. Yet he opened his eyes and looked ahead with confidence, reminding himself that even as a simple cleaner he had faced this kind of trouble many times before. A glowing circle formed at his fingertips, the magic squeezing into a tight, round ball until he felt it was ready, and without hesitating for a single second, he spun around. He dropped to one knee, gun ready as a figure rushed toward him, whispering that this was his only chance. But then the runner suddenly fell to their knees too. Estar stared with wide eyes, looking as confused and baffled as a goldfish. The man slid forward on his knees, wailing desperately, "Oh heavens, young master." And when Damien froze at the familiar voice, the man hugged the boy and cried bitterly about how long he had searched for him, only for Damien to push him away in disgust and refuse to go back, while Estar watched with a disgusted curl of his lip before Alfredo tucked the pouting Damien under his arm, introduced himself as the Blander family butler, and politely invited Estar to return with them, leaving Estar's mind in turmoil as he imagined the schemes of prestigious families but ultimately smirked and agreed because the Blander territory lay right on his planned route to the Zenian Academy's legendary library. So he nodded, accepted the offer, and followed Alfredo ahead under the bright moonlight while deciding to see if the Blander family's food lived up to the hype. After a smooth ride, the carriage pulled up to a huge estate, and Estar stepped down calmly, walking with a relaxed but steady pace as he declared, "We've arrived at the Blander family mansion." He raised his head to take a look at the building standing right in front of him. This was the Blander family's first official visit to their big mansion, where a long line of people stood neat and respectful right at the door. Alfredo bowed and gestured inside, telling the boy to rest while he counted on Lancy, the maid who then led the sweating Damien away and shut the door just as he screamed, leaving the boy alone with his mistake while Alfredo walked silently through the quiet mansion under the pale moonlight. Reaching the door, he knocked softly, heard a voice say, "Come in," and then gently pushed it open to step inside. In the grand, classic room, a woman's voice called out, "Damien," and he bowed to report that he'd brought back the boy from Gray-White District Number 7, causing the bright chandelier to shine down as the air grew strangely quiet before a sudden blast flew straight at Alfredo's face while he stayed perfectly still. With her hand raised and the magic circle still glowing, she asked, "You mean the Gray-White District 7? She exploded into a furious storm of questions about Damien's safety, but Alfredo remained calm to soothe her, gently asking her to wait while he explained. Once the story was told, she withdrew her magic with a sigh of relief, only for Alfredo to smile inwardly at her mother's natural rage before respectfully bowing, and then narrowing his eyes as he revealed the unusual fact that Asta had detected him before he even arrived and was already ready to fight back. Alfredo peeked closely at the shape and confirmed it, then noted that the kid they faced held a mana bullet, prompting Madame Gamma to nod in approval at the astonishing talent of a child from the Gray-White District, which made Alfredo's gaze turn resolute as he made a grave request. And by the next morning when the sunlight filled the grand estate, Alfredo enthusiastically asked to become the successor, leaving Asta, who had just woken up, completely speechless and frozen. Alfredo felt his heart swelling with pride like a blooming flower, thinking that the young boy would never turn down a chance for glory and wealth offered by a man of his status, until Asta's quiet words made him freeze. "No," Alfredo said, stunned and speechless, staring at Asta who casually cleaned his ear with a look of doubt. "What?" Damien peeked in with wide eyes, confused by the scene. Asta bowed slightly to thank them for the offer to be his successor, then quietly covered Damien's mouth and told him to stop talking. Damien glared back angrily, insisting he had spoken, while Alfredo realized that Asta's cold, arrogant attitude came from his past as a poor, nameless kid who had learned magic all on his own. Seeing Asta's fearless face, Alfredo felt his patience wearing thin and tried to calm him down, explaining that while Asta might feel he can conquer the world now, His situation was just like a goblin trapped in a dark mountain cave. Growing up hidden in a crack, he knew nothing of the scary world outside until a loud crack and a giant stomp made the ground shake, causing a small, angry creature to grow huge while another boy calmly scratched his ear and said he was just like a dragon king, promising to show them just how vast and terrifying the real world is as sunlight finally filled the big castle. Two figures, one tall and one short, both with faces as hard as stone, marched straight into the castle. As the strange noise outside drew everyone's attention, the palace staff instantly lined up and bowed in perfect unison to greet the butler, who immediately acted with great authority to impress the young genius named Asta. Even though Asta remained unimpressed and quietly realized that these seemingly ordinary teenagers possessed a powerful energy that filled the entire room. When he looked into their eyes, he saw that they were truly just a bunch of goblins with no good feelings at all. Asta spoke up, "Yeah, I do feel something," which made Alfredo light up with joy and eagerly ask if Asta would accept his offer. Alfredo then praised Asta to the skies, saying that if Asta succeeded him, he would shine even brighter than anyone. But Asta sharply turned away and bluntly stated that he hates lights, leaving Alfredo shocked and asking how such a thing could happen. Just then, a young man with a mole under his eye, known as the Great Butler, stepped forward with a smirk and asked if the Great Butler had something to say in return. The butler confidently explained that if Asta truly felt something, he wouldn't have refused the invitation so bluntly, implying that Asta hasn't felt enough yet. Asta looked at him with a neutral expression and said that if permitted, he would like to give him an experience, prompting the butler to ask if he wanted to spar. The butler shrugged with a smug look and clarified that to them. "I'm just a smiling beggar who crawled out of nowhere, but deep inside, I'm a monster hiding in human skin." Asta pointed ahead and asked if he could pick his opponent, and when told to go for it, he quickly singled out the guy who had suggested the game, but then kept pointing at more people until even Alfredo started panicking. "I'll fight all 5 at once." And just hearing those 3 words made the initial smugness on their faces vanish, replaced by pure shock. Asta flicked his fingers in a mocking gesture, his eyes and voice freezing over, and while the bystander Alfredo broke into a cold sweat and felt a sudden rush of caution, his mouth slowly opened. He burst out laughing, declaring that was the right spirit, then asked Asta if he was truly ready to take responsibility for those insulting words before starting the challenge where Asta would have to survive 1 minute to earn a gift or else inherit the butler role. And though Asta agreed and stepped onto the arena alone against 5 others while a crowd gathered, a nearby trainer worried about the danger but Alfredo remained calm, insisting the boy needed to break through his stubbornness to grow even as he suddenly realized Damien and Lance had also arrived. Seeing this, he bowed down and whispered to Damien, "Young master, your friend is in serious trouble. Please stop the Great Butler." Thinking this might fix things, he heard Damien's eyes light up with joy. "Really? That's surprising," he exclaimed. The narrator then slapped his forehead in exasperation. "Oh heavens!" Meanwhile, Lance warned, "If the young master gets involved, Madame Gamma will explode and drag him away." So he crossed his arms, pouted, and turned away muttering, "Damn it!" Since the match had taken too long to start, he urged, "Trainer, what are you waiting for? Begin." Reluctantly, he had no choice but to agree, "Yes, understood." While Damien received his usual scolding from Lance, the trainer walked away in helpless silence, wiping away tears and muttering, Off track. I did my best." But his sorrow caught Lance's eye. She vanished instantly to leave Damien with only a warning, "I'll be right back, don't interfere," only for her pitiful face to twist into a sneer once she was gone. "All right," the trainer agreed, stepping between them to lay out the rules. "It will be turn-based," until a voice from outside shouted, "No, make it a free-for-all." Forced to comply, the trainer nodded, "As you wish," and quickly switched to a neutral tone to announce, "The format is a free-for-all. The match continues until one side surrenders. However, I may stop the match at any time. Remember that." With the rules set, Asta stared at his opponents with fierce focus, ready to fight, while the 5 opponents on the other side were just as nervous. As he stared at the man, his jaw clenched in pure disgust and his voice boomed, "You filthy beggar, even the young master and the butler pity you. But who are you really? I'll crush you and drag your true face out for everyone to see." With that, he ordered, "Begin." And the instant the words left his mouth, he slammed a punch into the man's stomach, sending tears and spit flying everywhere. He suddenly grabbed his eyes while his mouth hung wide open in pain, then glanced back at his teammates. The other 4 were twisted on the floor in agony, just as badly off as he was. He stared at the person before him, fear twisting his face while his smile stayed frozen, and declared, "Looks like I need to teach you a lesson. Never underestimate the weak," before noticing the magic on Asta's hand and panicking as he realized it was a mana bullet, a basic trick that wastes too much energy to be useful in a real fight. Asta's icy words echoed once more. Second, stop judging people so quickly. And with a snap of his fingers, the magic surged toward all 5 of them. A direct hit to the head made everyone scream in pain. His eyes were now wide with sheer terror. Third, Asta sprinted right at him with wide eyes and a fist held level, declaring that the world is vast and bitter, which left him frozen in his tracks. Those words were the signal, and a mighty punch hit him so hard he was sent flying. After finishing, he kindly reminded, "From now on, I'll pour all these experiences into you. Learn properly." Once Asta gave him his full lesson, the man looked from top to bottom, utterly wrecked, one hand clutching his face as he screamed, "You lunatic! This isn't magic." "It is," Asta replied, then took a step back with one foot to gain momentum. He launched a brutal hit that knocked out his front teeth, shouting, "This is physical magic," which made the trainer's eyes pop wide open and his jaw drop in pure shock. Everyone watching from the side was just as shocked, all looking stunned without saying a word. Asta fought so hard in the arena that his hands and feet never stopped moving, yanking enemies close with a grin while stomping loudly on others. Alfredo couldn't believe what he saw and whispered to himself that those were mana bullets. 4 or 5 of them packed with power that felt like they had been compressed at least 4 times, and he couldn't stop himself from imagining how much worse it would have been if just one had hit them right then. Alfredo was deep in thought about his rare gift for controlling magic, but the trainer suddenly raced past him with a face shining, as if he had just found a treasure. As he pictured the demons smashing the 5 little ones, he couldn't believe how well he punched and kicked until a sharp shout of "Alfredo" made him jump and turn around. Lancy stepped forward with Madame Gamo just ahead, causing the surprised man to call out her name, while others inside realized she had arrived like a life raft for the crying trainer, who nodded for her to save them. Madame Gamo's serious voice cut through the air like a whip as she demanded to know what chaos had broken out, forcing the nervous man to stutter an apology while claiming it was just a simple test, only for her sharp eyes to land on the battlefield he'd created and the way he was grabbing someone by the collar, making her snap that this wasn't a test but a disaster, which instantly made the startled Damien guiltily remember her commanding voice calling his name and obey her order to gather the trainees and retreat with a humble bow. She told Damien to go back to his room, and he instantly dropped his mischievous grin to scratch his head and act innocent in front of his mother. "Asta isn't safe from this either," she said, pointing at the trainer as she ordered him back to his room, then turned to face Runfit, who was already sweating as he bowed and admitted he did his best, only for her to calmly tell him he was fired, leaving him frozen in shock before she called for Alfredo the butler to apologize and accept her punishment for going too far. She asked if Damien had helped Asta during his practice match against the trainees, and he calmly explained that Asta fought alone, though he paused to add that Asta was incredibly skilled and had even used a dangerous mana bullet during the match. That power grew so scary it proved he has amazing mana control, since one shot was all it took to knock out 5 trainees, leaving Asta standing tall among the writhing, injured bodies. On the sofa, Damien puffed his cheeks and glared while munching on a pastry, but when he spotted someone, he immediately raised a hand to greet them. Beside him, Madame Gamo smiled warmly and invited, "Asta, you're here. Come sit." And once he was seated, he skipped the small talk and went straight to the point, saying, "I heard you summoned me." "Yes." Only for her to first take out a box and push it toward him. He stared at the box as a voice whispered that Alfredo had promised him a gift, a reward he remembered from before the match where he'd been told he'd get something if he lasted a minute, only to be surprised that it had arrived so quickly and was personally wrapped by Madame Gamo, who smiled warmly and told him to open it, so he carefully lifted the lid. The moment the lid lifted, a bright light spilled out to reveal a golden gem that left him stunned, prompting him to suspect that Madame Gamo's generous gift was hiding a secret agenda, since such a high-grade treasure is usually only given to top trainees. She gently stroked her son's head and told him to accept the gift without worry, explaining that since he had already helped Damien in the gray zone, this was just an apology for today's events, but when he asked if taking it meant joining Blander or if it contained poison, she firmly denied both concerns until he finally stopped hesitating, closed the box, accepted it with a thank you, and then Damien casually reached for another pastry. As he gazed at the item in the box with sparkling eyes and a watering mouth, she interrupted his celebration with a proposal. She wanted to enroll him in the academy to study alongside Damien, a sudden development that made his brother look up from his indifference. He asked with curiosity, "Academy?" She replied, "Actually, Damien was supposed to start last year." Her eyes filled with sadness as she looked at her son. "But he fought it so hard that we waited until this year, and I never expected him to just run away." Damien kept chewing his pastry without a care, turning his face away as if he wanted to ignore the whole situation. She asked Damien if he liked his friend, and he agreed as long as he came along, which made Bianca realize her fear was real. If she forced him, he'd just say no and run away again. It seemed like a good deal for him too, as he admitted the academy was a solid choice in a world where family ties and connections ruled everything. Yet he clenched his teeth and admitted that while the offer sounded fine, it felt like a trap he had to think about before saying yes. Seizing the moment, she asked why he had turned down Alfredo's offer to take his place, and he quickly looked past her toward the door. He grinned mischievously and said, "Well, my knees are quite valuable too," leaving her completely puzzled. "What?" Outside, Alfredo pressed his ear to the door trying to hear what was happening, and at a big house right as the sun came up, Asta opened his mouth and let out a cold breath. Sitting cross-legged on the bed and practicing magic, I realized this was a domain treasure, and even though I only absorbed 10%, my mana had grown that much. Est suddenly opened his eyes and looked down, wondering if his body had truly changed with the fire mark, noticing the mana swirling around the hand on his thigh and realizing that despite absorbing a domain, he felt no loss, which was far better than he expected. Est calmly looked toward the window, accepting that his time at the academy was likely already decided. As the sky outside the window slowly lightened, I realized that joining the academy would make finding support much easier, offering many benefits. Yet turning my head inward felt like walking straight into a trap, so maybe I should just take a walk. Thinking that, a moment later Est walked out of the room and shut the door. Suddenly someone spoke up and made him look over, while the platinum-haired man leaned against the wall to stare intently at Est, inwardly noting that such hair color belonged only to the main bloodline like Damien, which meant Est must be from a branch family. Why does this family always cause so much trouble? A few minutes later, Est spoke without any care, and the platinum-haired man suddenly jumped at the word no, rubbing his chin in confusion as he stared at her gray hair and irritated eyes, muttering that it was all her fault. His entire body went stiff in a split second, a red cross mark showed up, and take a look at this guy. Est suddenly pointed to his own head, reminding us that hair color can shift depending on the light. Right after he wore his most charming smile and opened those eyes that could never be called irritating. The guy with platinum hair pursed his lips and gave Est a hard look. He turned his face away, leaving me with the gentler sight in my own eyes, apologizing for the mix-up before I walked off. Right then, Alfredo burst out from somewhere shouting, "Hey young man, no Aster. I came to clear up the misunderstanding. I couldn't talk to you properly last night and I've been tossing and turning all night." But even as he knelt on the ground sobbing non-stop, he was told, "Even as a butler, there's no need to kneel until your knees bleed. It's just a misunderstanding." Est stared at Alfredo's feet, then awkwardly looked up to see the platinum-haired man stopped and glaring at him. Est clicked his tongue in annoyance, cursed the situation, and then heard the platinum-haired guy shout right after, realizing with fear that those eyes were the cursed ones that make you kneel and die, and you never see them often. He pointed furiously at Est's face, admitting he'd been caught and shouting that she dared to trick him while acting so shameless. The platinum-haired guy gritted his teeth in a scary way, but I was ready to face it. Suddenly, he locked eyes with Alfredo's sharp, blade-like stare, causing the platinum-haired guy to instantly shut up and angrily look away. He turned stiffly and growled that I could leave today but had better visit the magic tower later to fix my attitude, to which Est calmly replied, "Fine." Once he was gone, Alfredo softly asked what had happened, and Est closed her eyes with a smile to answer him. "Nothing at all." Est let out a mocking breath and sneered, perfect timing since my mood wasn't great. He watched the man with white hair walk away and decided to handle him later. Then Estate suddenly shouted out to the head butler. He offered a soft smile and asked if he could see the lady right now. Not long after the sky grew brighter, we were still hanging out at that same mansion. Gamo held a pen over a blank page and said, "Welcome, Aster." She closed her eyes with a faint smile as Gamo asked if she decided to meet him early, and he eagerly replied, "Yes, madam." He stood straight before her and said, "I will join the academy." Gamo couldn't help but widen her eyes in surprise at the answer. She smiled again to hide her earlier mistake, which was truly surprising since I never thought you'd make such a quick decision. S smiled at her, and we knew we had to get ready right away. Gamo made sure he knew to rest, and as he bowed with a grateful "Thank you, madam," he settled in to relax. Then Estate vanished from the room, the door clicked shut, and just a moment later, Alfredo peeked through the crack to see what happened next. The moment he stepped in, he spoke softly to her, and luckily, she agreed. In the blink of an eye, Alfredo's entire body burst with excitement, proving that youthful passion and a burning fire in his eyes were real, while Gamo just stared back with dull, uninterested eyes. Alfredo suddenly pointed with shining eyes, declaring the first semester was fine and he'd pay, yet he worried about the second term and the terrifying tuition bill that would make a student from the black and white zone feel uneasy and anxious about the knowledge he desperately wanted to gain. In Alfredo's dream, a hand reaches out to save him just as he is transformed into an angel surrounded by gold coins. A rescue he knows is only possible because of his sponsor. At this point, Gamo couldn't take the noise anymore and spoke up, saying Alfredo was being too loud, which made Alfredo jolt and immediately apologize by saying he was too excited since mealtime was almost here and he needed to head to the kitchen first. Gamo watched him walk out and quietly shut the door behind him. She closed her eyes and sighed, letting me know why Alfred was so thrilled after so many rejections, until Gamo suddenly blinked her eyes open with a cold, dangerous look. She thought to herself that the Academy's offer was just a trick, yet she wondered what gave Alfred such sureness. Gamo shook her head, remembering how she'd been tricked by the old butler, while Alfredo skipped down the hall on the other side, looking like a happy fool. On Est's side, he strolled down the stairs at his own easy pace. In a sudden flash, Est raised his head and stared straight ahead. Before him stood a towering spire, the very magic tower where the Branch family guy had arrived. Thinking about it, Est carefully stepped inside the tower. Suddenly, a figure in a full cloak appeared and demanded to know their purpose. But they hesitated, silently realizing they didn't even know the stranger's name. Est gestured and spoke to describe the platinum-haired stranger, who understood perfectly, stepped forward with a welcoming hand, and said, "Perfect timing. I've been waiting for you. This way." He walked ahead, but he was so tired he couldn't help yawning. Reaching a door, he paused and said, "You can come in from here." Just before the cloaked figure vanished, they whispered to bow when the door opened, but Est simply pushed it open and walked into the pitch-dark room. Suddenly, a cloud of papers and dust blasted into his face, and he finally understood what he meant by bowing. Est couldn't stop coughing until a voice suddenly cut through the noise, addressing him as Aster. The person holding a candle slowly stepped out, saying, "Hello? Nice to meet you." Under the flickering candlelight, Henzi's creepy grin appeared, sending a chill through you, and he asked if you'd come for his little brother. Est stared at the little guy in shock, wondering how this small kid could be his older brother. One evening in his past life, the hero knelt high above, having learned from his undercover work at a magic lab that even the dirtiest jobs hold secrets. He looked down at them with a cold stare. He peered into the inner courtyard of a building, just like any magic researcher would do. With tables stacked high in papers, the tired workers who are known as pen pushers stand in a group. A young man grabbed his thinning hair in horror, realizing that pulling it out so much had finally made it stop growing. He rubbed his chin and mentally broke the problem down into steps. One person donned a hooded cloak to cover their head, a clear sign of the first stage of denial. Another revealed a bald patch, with stage 2 giving up and exposing it. And then there's the bald-headed guy in stage 3 shaving off the last bits, followed by the frantic spellcaster in stage 4, who's trying to make the impossible possible with hair growth magic. But no one has ever succeeded. Back in the present, Est judged Henzi, but found him strange as the man calmly poured tea and offered a leisurely apology. Henzi slowly told the story of being the spoiled youngest child, and Est stared blankly while he admitted he never expected such a rude and insolent act toward a guest. Henzi kept a soft smile on his face while Est thought to himself that Henzi was quite young and had a lot of hair. Est suddenly spoke and admitted without hesitation that you likely work at a magic research institute, where he currently serves as vice director while offering you some tea. Henzi smiled, then suddenly caught sight of the way Est was looking at him. He closed his eyes tight and whispered, "Aster, you're so strange. You don't look like anyone from the gray zone at all." Est could only give an awkward laugh, wishing inwardly that he had been more cautious, but seeing how kindly he was smiling made it hard to stay on guard. Est watched Henzi sipping his tea and let out a quiet sigh, thinking to himself that the two of them were cut from the same cloth. He suddenly spoke, asking if you'd been invited to Zenian Academy and offering congratulations, while Est managed a casual smile in response. Henzi went on, saying it would be a great chance to learn a lot, and he even mentioned he was a Zenian graduate from class 145, which made Est pull out his own alumni card with a sheepish laugh and a quick apology before they got back to the main point. Est looked puzzled at the main issue, but Henzi set down his teacup, gave a cold smile, and asked straight at him, "Before we go further, tell me, are you willing to risk your life for a friend?" Est scratched his head, looking puzzled and asking, "What?" Henzi suddenly pulled a glowing book out of thin air, a heavy secret that could save the Blander family or cost him his life, and he held it up for a stunned Est to see. While Gamo quietly trimmed flowers in a greenhouse, his hand suddenly froze as if holding his breath. Gamo lifted her face to gaze upward, then released a quiet sigh. She thought to herself that the headaches caused by Damien signing up are finally over, since it went off without a hitch and one less thing to worry about is gone. Outside under the blue sky, a flock of birds flew freely as Gamo thought of Asta as a true friend, admiring his bold yet normal nature for his age and loving how Damien stays true to himself without flattery. So she decided she must find a way to keep such rare and honest talent close for his future. His face kept its gentle smile, but Asta frowned in irritation, noting that while emotions usually show in the eyes, this man looked like an emotionless assassin who wore a mask and hid his true self. Hensei suddenly warned him not to rush for the reward, yet Asta sneered and declared his refusal, making Hensei's eyes widen in surprise. Asta casually crossed his legs and said, "We crawled out of the same mud, so let's drop the formality. If you have a question, just ask," before folding his arms with an arrogant smirk and adding, "If I can do it, I will, and if I can't, then no." Hensei's smile vanished and he warned, "Even hearing that could cost you your life, and if you refuse afterward, I'll have to kill you, Asta." To which Asta provocatively retorted, "Go ahead and kill me. I've died before, so why not again?" But just as he finished, he rolled his eyes, thought for a moment, and muttered to himself, "Wait, no. I'm actually the one who's died twice, aren't I?" Instantly, a furious gale whipped up inside the room. Hensei burst out with so much magic that papers flew everywhere like they were caught in a sudden storm. Even the teacup on the table shook so hard it rattled violently. Hensei scrunched up his face and pushed out a much stronger blast of magic power, aiming it right at Asta, who just sat there in his chair looking totally calm. Then Hensei suddenly burst out laughing. Hensei pulled his mana back, scratched his head awkwardly, and admitted, "Man, this is something, Asta. You passed the test." He paused before getting straight to the point. "I need someone I can trust, but they absolutely cannot be from the Blander family." Asta frowned, thinking he might just punch him, while Hensei grinned and explained that drifters in the gray zone are usually shady, suggesting Asta's judgment might still be a bit young. Asta finished his thought by asking about his little brother picking a fight with a guest, and Hensei agreed that using that as an excuse for a casual meeting was reasonable, even though Asta internally wondered if a vice director really needed such a flimsy reason to summon someone. Hensei acknowledged the suspicion, clarified that the Blander family was actually very united, and then suddenly stopped, his smile completely vanishing. Hensei grew serious and admitted he was being watched by the Deculan family, which made Asta suspicious, so when Hensei explained that he had stolen their secret bloodline art while only trying to study how to stop it, Asta interrupted to ask how a man thought dead could still be alive, only for Hensei to laugh and reveal his obsession with making that forbidden technique even stronger, a dangerous idea that Asta suddenly realized was the same reason the Deculan family destroyed the Blander family, in a past life to win a deadly bet. Asta started to figure it out, realizing that was why he was so terrifyingly strong, until a sudden voice called out, "Asta," making him finally lift his head and refocus. With a tone of suspicion, Hensei asked if Asta was now regretting their deal, and since Asta admitted he was tired and confused about why Hensei had even approached him, Hensei explained that he hadn't yet reported his research on the prime origin technique to the family, leading Asta to realize that spies must be hiding within the Blander household, prompting Hensei to suggest they might be targeting his secretary, only for him to clarify that the leak actually stems from his own collection routes, which forced Asta to agree that someone must have deliberately exposed his security plans to steal the research before Hensei confirmed that he had already launched a countermeasure to protect his life, and offered Asta a chance to side with the Deculans. But Hensei insisted on keeping this joint project secret since it hadn't been progressing well and promised to compensate Asta by delivering the thesis to Professor Farron at Zenian Academy in exchange for the Holy Light Healing Technique. Which, Hensei bragged that they always fought for top spots from their student days until he became a teaching assistant, but he quit when he joined the Blando family, while Asta thought to himself that he was still the better one, or maybe he was just deluded, and he felt so annoyed by Professor Farron that he thought the whole world was doomed. Under the moonlit night at the